In Seattle, 70-year-old Elena Miller cherished her time with her 8-year-old granddaughter, Emily, after the tragic loss of Emily's parents. Their bond grew stronger each day, filled with love, stories, and shared memories. But their peaceful life was shattered when social services took Emily away, questioning Elena's ability to care for her due to her age. The court case that followed was tense, with shocking revelations from Emily that changed everything. What started as a fight for custody became a quest for truth, unveiling a hidden conspiracy behind the accident that claimed her parents' lives. The journey was filled with heartache and hope, but in the end, justice prevailed, and Emily was returned to the loving arms of her grandmother. Together, they found peace, knowing that their love and courage had conquered the darkness. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Elena Miller, a devoted and nurturing 70-year-old grandmother, lived a quiet life in Seattle with her beloved 8-year-old granddaughter, Emily. The shadow of grief had loomed over their lives since the tragic accident that claimed the lives of Emily's parents, yet the two had slowly begun to find a semblance of normalcy. Just when it seemed that the worst was behind them, an unexpected knock at the door shattered their fragile peace. Social services arrived without warning, tearing Emily away from the only family she had left. Elena was stripped of custody and deemed too old and frail to provide the care Emily needed. The heartbreak was unimaginable. The custody battle moved to the courtroom, where the atmosphere was thick with tension. Every breath was held as they waited for Emily's testimony, a young girl's voice that could decide her fate. When Emily finally spoke, her words revealed a dark secret she had kept hidden since the tragic night her parents died. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the truth emerged, altering the direction of the trial in ways no one could have anticipated. Welcome to our channel, where stories like this one remind us of the profound, often painful, complexities of life. This is a tale that has resonated across the globe, touching hearts and shaking beliefs. Stay with us until the end, because what you're about to hear may forever change the way you see the world. The night of the accident was one of those that Seattle would never forget. The rain poured down mercilessly, and the roads became treacherous. Emily's parents were well known and cherished in the community. Their sudden death left a wound that would never fully heal. As the rain continued to fall, their car lost control on the slick pavement, skidding into the path of a truck. Emily was safe at home with her babysitter, but the phone call that came in the dead of night shattered her innocence forever. The news hit like a thunderbolt, and when Elena received the call, it felt as though her heart was being ripped apart. Yet, in that moment of profound sorrow, she knew she had to summon all her strength for Emily, the granddaughter who now depended entirely on her. Life with Elena was difficult at first. Emily's young mind was tormented by the nightmares of her parents' death. She would often wake in the middle of the night, her cries echoing through the empty house. Despite her overwhelming grief, Elena was always there, whispering comforting words and recounting stories of Emily's parents' stories filled with laughter, love, and the warmth of family bonds. Together, they created a nighttime ritual, lighting a candle before bed and saying a prayer for Emily's parents. This small act became their way of keeping the memory of Emily's parents alive, a beacon of hope in their darkest hours. The months following the accident were especially harrowing. Elena, already retired and living on a modest pension, found herself facing the crushing weight of financial hardship. The medical expenses, funeral costs, and the sudden responsibility of raising a child on her own left her in dire straits. But Elena, determined to provide for Emily, took up a part-time job at a local bakery. Every day she rose before dawn, her old bones weary but her spirit unbroken, all to ensure that Emily never wanted for anything. Emily, meanwhile, struggled with the enormity of her loss. She became withdrawn, her once bright eyes clouded with sadness. At school, her teachers noticed the change and grew concerned. Elena spent countless hours in meetings with them, doing everything in her power to make sure Emily received the emotional support she so desperately needed. She also enrolled Emily in therapy, hoping that professional help could ease the burden of the trauma that weighed so heavily on her granddaughter's small shoulders. Despite the overwhelming challenges, Elena and Emily clung to each other with unwavering love and resilience. Their journey was far from easy, but together they found the strength to face each new day, even as the shadows of the past continued to loom over them. And then came the day in court when Emily's secret was revealed, a secret that would change everything, not just for them, but for everyone who heard it. Despite the overwhelming difficulties, there were fleeting moments of joy and glimmers of hope that Elena and Emily held onto with all their might. On weekends, they often strolled hand in hand through the bustling corridors of Pike Place Market, where the air was thick with the scent of fresh flowers and the vibrant energy of street performers. These simple outings became a cherished sanctuary for them, a brief escape from the tumultuous storm their lives had become. Yet, just as they began to settle into this fragile peace, life threw another curveball their way, one that would challenge the very foundation of their bond in ways they could never have foreseen. As time passed, Elena and Emily gradually carved out a new routine amidst the remnants of their shattered world. School days transitioned into afternoons filled with homework, playtime, and the soft murmur of bedtime stories. The nights were illuminated with laughter that echoed through the halls of their home, a stark contrast to the silence that had once haunted those same walls. Determined to keep the memory of Emily's parents alive, Elena often pulled out old photo albums, recounting stories of her son's childhood. It was her way of weaving the past into the present, ensuring that Emily never lost her connection to the parents she had loved so dearly. "Grandma, what was Dad like when he was my age?" Emily's innocent voice broke the silence one evening as she carefully turned the pages of a well-worn photo album. Elena's heart warmed at the question. "Oh, he was just like you, full of boundless energy and an insatiable curiosity," she replied, her eyes twinkling with nostalgia. "He loved running around and exploring the forest behind our old house. There wasn't a single day that he didn't come home with some discovery or adventure to share." As the weeks turned into months, Emily began to emerge from the shell of grief that had once enveloped her. She made new friends at school and eagerly brought home her drawings and projects, her face beaming with pride. Each of these small victories filled Elena's heart with immense joy. They established little rituals that became the cornerstones of their new life together. Sunday mornings spent flipping pancakes in the kitchen and afternoons tending to the flowers they planted in the garden. Yet beneath the surface of their newfound happiness, a persistent shadow of dread loomed. Elena was acutely aware that any misstep, however minor, could attract the scrutiny of social services. She worked tirelessly to keep their home spotless and immersed herself in Emily's school life, driven by the desire to prove to the world, and perhaps to herself, that she was providing the best possible environment for her granddaughter. This fragile tranquility was abruptly shattered on a crisp spring afternoon. Elena was in the kitchen, lost in the familiar routine of preparing dinner, when a firm knock at the door jolted her out of her reverie. Her heart raced as she dried her hands on her apron and made her way to the door. Standing on the porch were two social workers, their expressions unreadable, but their presence unmistakably ominous. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Miller. We're from social services. We've received a report and need to discuss some concerns regarding Emily," one of the women said, her voice formal as she extended her identification. Elena felt her heart skip a beat, a cold fear gripping her chest, but she forced herself to remain composed. Of course she managed, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Please come in. What seems to be the issue?" As the social workers explained, Elena's worst fears began to materialize. They had received an anonymous tip, a report that suggested she might not be capable of caring for Emily due to her age. The implication struck her like a physical blow, but she listened intently, determined to defend the life she had painstakingly rebuilt with her granddaughter. Just as the conversation grew more serious, Emily, who had been playing in the backyard, burst into the kitchen, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Who are these people, Grandma?" she asked, her voice tinged with the innocence of a child unaware of the storm brewing around her. Elena looked into her granddaughter's eyes, feeling a surge of protectiveness and love. She knew then, with every fiber of her being, that she would fight with all she had to keep Emily safe, no matter the cost. Elena knelt at Emily's level, her gentle eyes filled with love and reassurance as she placed a tender hand on her granddaughter's small shoulder. "These ladies are just here to make sure everything is all right," sweetheart, Elena said softly, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside. "Why don't you head to your room and finish your drawing? I'll talk to them and come to you in a bit." Emily nodded, trusting her grandmother implicitly, and disappeared down the hallway. As the sound of her footsteps faded, the social workers began their inspection. They asked a series of probing questions about Emily's daily routine, her health, and her emotional well-being. Every answer Elena provided was honest and composed, but a growing unease gnawed at her heart. They moved through the house, making notes and taking photos, their faces a mask of professionalism that offered no clue to their thoughts. At the end of the visit, one of the social workers turned to Elena with a measured tone. "We will need to conduct regular visits to ensure that everything continues to be okay, and we'll also need to speak with Emily during these visits." As they left, the weight of the world seemed to press down on Elena's shoulders. The very walls of her home, once a sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in on her. She knew that even the slightest misstep, the smallest flaw, could result in losing Emily, the child who had become the center of her universe. A few weeks after the visit, the dreaded notification arrived. A court hearing had been scheduled to discuss Emily's custody. The words on the paper were like a dagger to Elena's heart, but she knew she had no choice but to summon every ounce of strength she had left and fight. The day of the hearing dawned cold and gray, the sky mirroring the dread in Elena's heart. The courthouse was bustling with people, the air thick with tension. Elena's hands trembled as she held Emily's small hand, each step down the corridor feeling like a march toward an uncertain fate. "Grandma, what's happening? Why are we here?" Emily whispered, her wide eyes filled with fear and confusion as she looked up at Elena. Elena stopped, kneeling once more to meet her granddaughter's gaze. She smoothed back a stray lock of Emily's hair, her voice soft yet firm. "We're here to talk to a judge, my dear. They just want to make sure everything is all right with us. Don't worry, I'm here, and I will take care of everything. I promise." Elena's lawyer, John Thompson, a compassionate man with a reassuring presence, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Mrs. Miller, we've gathered all the evidence to show that Emily is being raised in a loving and safe home. We'll get through this." The hearing began, and the social workers were called to testify. They recounted their visits, detailing the concerns raised in the anonymous report. As Elena listened, her heart grew heavier with every word, but she refused to let her fear show. John stood up next, methodically presenting the mountain of evidence. They had prepared school reports showcasing Emily's progress, heartfelt testimonies from neighbors and friends who had witnessed Elena's devotion, and a letter from Emily's pediatrician, affirming her good health and well-being. Then, the moment everyone had been dreading arrived. Emily was called to the stand. The room held its breath as the young girl, clutching a small teddy bear, made her way forward. She glanced back at Elena, her eyes searching for comfort. Elena gave her a reassuring nod, her heart swelling with pride and fear. Emily took a deep breath, her voice steady as she spoke. The truth she revealed, the depth of her love for her grandmother, and the vivid memories she shared of their life together left the courtroom in stunned silence. At that moment, it became clear to everyone present that the bond between Elena and Emily was unbreakable. It was a bond forged in the fires of tragedy, nurtured by unconditional love, and strengthened by the countless sacrifices Elena had made. The judge, moved by the testimony and the overwhelming evidence, finally spoke, his words echoing through the quiet room as a glimmer of hope pierced through the dark clouds of uncertainty that had hung over Elena and Emily's lives. "I like living with Grandma. She takes care of me and loves me." Emily's voice rang out, clear and filled with emotion, her words carrying the weight of her deep bond with Elena. The judge, a stern man with a solemn expression, listened intently. He thanked Emily and announced that he needed additional time to thoroughly review all the presented information before rendering his decision. As Elena and Emily left the courtroom, they carried with them a fragile sense of relief, mingled with the ever-present anxiety of the uncertain days ahead. But just when they thought they had faced the worst, another devastating blow came. Elena was informed that new accusations had surfaced, this time from an old family acquaintance harboring a long-held grudge. The accusations were severe, alleging that Elena was negligent and unfit to care for Emily because of her advanced age. The news struck Elena like a thunderbolt, filling her with a deep sense of betrayal and fear for Emily's future. In a meeting with John, her lawyer, the gravity of the situation became painfully clear. "Eleanor, these accusations are serious, but they're not insurmountable," John said, his voice calm yet urgent. "We need to gather more testimonies and solid evidence that demonstrate your unwavering capability as Emily's guardian." Elena, her eyes filled with determination, nodded firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes. I can't lose Emily." What followed were days of relentless effort. John and Elena worked tirelessly, combing through every possible source of support. Neighbors who had witnessed Elena's devotion, close friends who knew the depth of her love for Emily, and even Emily's teachers and school counselors all stepped forward to provide emotional testimonies about Elena's dedication and the positive impact she had on Emily's life. These testimonies painted a vivid picture of a grandmother who had transformed her life to ensure that Emily had the stability, love, and care she desperately needed. Meanwhile, the growing tension did not escape Emily's notice. One evening, as Elena was in the kitchen preparing dinner, Emily quietly approached her, her small face etched with concern. "Grandma, why are they saying bad things about you?" Emily asked, her eyes wide and worried. Elena's heart ached at the question. She stopped what she was doing, knelt and wrapped Emily in a tight embrace. "Some people don't understand how much I love you and how hard I work to take care of you," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "But don't worry, my sweet girl. We'll get through this together, just like we always have." The days passed quickly, and soon the next hearing was upon them, scheduled for early autumn. Elena prepared meticulously, each step heavy with the weight of what was at stake. In the courtroom, she was surrounded by friends and supporters, all of whom believed in her, but the fear of losing Emily was a constant, gnawing presence in her heart. When her name was called, Elena rose from her seat, adjusted her coat with steady hands, and walked to the witness stand. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath as she took her place, her silent determination palpable. "Mrs. Miller," the opposing lawyer began, his tone sharp and probing, "are you aware of the accusations made against you?" "Yes, I am," Elena responded, her voice calm but unwavering. "How do you respond to these accusations of negligence and incapacity due to your advanced age?" the lawyer pressed. Elena paused, her eyes locking onto the judges before she spoke. "I love my granddaughter more than anything in this world," she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Since the tragic loss of her parents, I have dedicated my entire life to ensuring Emily's well-being. Yes, I am older, but that does not diminish my ability to care for her. On the contrary, it has made me even more determined to give her a life filled with love, safety, and every opportunity I can provide." As Elena's words hung in the air, John stood up to present the evidence they had painstakingly gathered. He spoke of Emily's stable routine, shared photos of their warm, welcoming home, and introduced testimonies from a range of people who had witnessed the love and care that permeated Emily's life. One of the most compelling witnesses was Margaret, a longtime neighbor and close friend. As she took the stand, she looked at Elena with kindness and resolve, ready to share the truth that she knew could help sway the judge's decision. "Mrs. Miller has been nothing short of a lifeline for Emily," Margaret began, her voice steady and clear. "I've watched as she's navigated this unthinkable tragedy with grace and strength, putting Emily's needs above all else. This child is thriving under her grandmother's care. If anyone here has any doubt, I assure you Elena is exactly the guardian Emily needs." Margaret's words, filled with conviction and emotional depth, resonated throughout the courtroom. As she stepped down, the atmosphere was charged with a sense of shared understanding and acknowledgement of the undeniable love and commitment that Elena had shown. Now, all they could do was wait for the judge's final decision, a decision that would determine the future of the precious bond between a grandmother and her granddaughter. "Eleanor is the most dedicated person I know. She always puts Emily first and creates an environment filled with love and care. I do not doubt that Emily is in good hands," Margaret testified with unwavering conviction. The judge listened intently, his gaze steady as he took notes, absorbing every word. His demeanor was serious, yet there was a hint of empathy in his eyes. As Elena stepped down from the witness stand, she felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. But when she returned to her seat, Emily immediately wrapped her small arms around her, pulling her into a tight hug. "You were amazing," Grandma Emily whispered, her voice filled with admiration and love. In the days that followed, more witnesses took the stand to speak on Elena's behalf. Each testimony painted a picture of a grandmother who was not only capable but exceptional in her role as Emily's guardian. Miss Harris, one of Emily's teachers, was among the most significant witnesses. "Emily is a bright, happy student who always speaks so lovingly of her grandmother," Miss Harris testified. "There have never been any signs of neglect or issues in her home. On the contrary, Eleanor is always present at school meetings, actively involved in Emily's education and well-being." The court also heard from Emily's pediatrician, who further bolstered the case. "Emily is in excellent health, both physically and emotionally. Eleanor is diligent in attending all medical appointments and follows every recommendation I make. There is absolutely no sign of neglect." As each witness shared their insights, Elena felt a sense of relief beginning to break through the fog of fear that had enveloped her for so long. Every word of support from the people who knew and loved her brought a sense of validation and hope. Yet, despite the strong testimonies, Elena was acutely aware that the final decision was still pending and nothing was certain. During a break in the proceedings, Elena and John took a moment to discuss their progress. "We're doing well, Elena. The witnesses have been solid, and their testimonies are building a strong case for you," John reassured her, his tone confident and encouraging. Elena nodded, though her heart still carried a heavy burden. "I hope it's enough, John. Emily is everything to me. I can't lose her." Emily, who had been quietly listening to their conversation, squeezed her grandmother's hand. "I believe in you, Grandma. I know everything will be all right." The final witness was Robert, an old family friend who had known Elena for over 4 decades. As he took the stand, he looked directly at the judge, his voice steady and filled with emotion. "I've known Elena for more than 40 years," Robert began. "She has always been a caring, responsible person with the highest moral character. The love and dedication she has for Emily are not just apparent, they are undeniable to anyone who knows them. Emily couldn't be in better hands." Robert's words echoed in the courtroom, a powerful testament to the woman Elena had always been. But even with such strong support, a gnawing sense of uncertainty began to settle in. The waiting each passing day without an answer was unbearable. The uncertainty loomed large, casting a shadow over their lives. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, pretending to watch a TV show that neither of them was truly engaged in, Emily voiced the anxiety that had been building inside her. "Grandma, why haven't they decided yet?" "I want to stay with you," Emily said, her voice trembling with the fear of the unknown. Elena's heart ached at her granddaughter's words. She turned to Emily, her face softening as she held the young girl's hand tightly. "I want that too, my love," Elena replied, her voice gentle but firm. "We are doing everything we can, and now we just have to be patient and trust that the truth will prevail." They sat there in the quiet, the warmth of their bond the only comfort they had as they waited for the decision that would determine their future. Elena knew that no matter what happened, she would fight to her last breath to keep Emily safe and happy. All they could do now was hope that the love they shared would be enough to convince the court that their place was together. However, the uncertainty wasn't confined to the waiting. Elena began noticing subtle, yet troubling, changes in Emily's behavior, small signs that something deeper was amiss. Emily, who had always been an open and expressive child, started to retreat into herself, her once lively demeanor giving way to periods of anxiety and distraction. It was as if a shadow had fallen over her, and despite Elena's best efforts to reach out, the distance between them seemed to grow. "Emily, is everything all right? You've seemed a little worried lately," Elena gently asked one evening as she stirred a pot of soup, her eyes filled with concern. "It's fine, Grandma," Emily replied quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just tired from school." Elena's heart sank. She could tell that Emily was holding something back, something that was weighing heavily on her young mind. But rather than push her, Elena decided to give her the space she needed, hoping that in time, Emily would feel comfortable enough to share what was troubling her. Yet, as days turned into weeks, Elena's unease only grew. Emily's behavior became increasingly worrisome. She started having nightmares again, waking up in the middle of the night with tears streaming down her face and crying out for her parents. Each time, Elena would rush to her side, holding her close and whispering soothing words, but the feeling that something important was being hidden never left her. One particularly distressing night, after finally calming Emily down, Elena knew she had to seek help. She decided to reach out to Emily's therapist, Dr. Stevens, who had been working with Emily since the accident. The next morning, she scheduled an urgent meeting to discuss her concerns. "Dr. Stevens, I'm really worried about Emily. She's been having frequent nightmares, and she seems so anxious, like there's something she's not telling me," Elena confided as she sat across from the therapist in his quiet, book-lined office. Dr. Stevens nodded thoughtfully, his expression serious. "Eleanor, it's not uncommon for children in high-stress situations like this to exhibit increased anxiety and stress. The court case and everything surrounding it could be affecting her more than she's able to express. I'll make sure to address these concerns in our sessions and try to understand what might be going on beneath the surface." In the sessions that followed, Dr. Stevens gently encouraged Emily to open up, creating a safe and trusting environment for her. One afternoon, as they sat together in his office, quietly drawing, he decided to approach the subject directly. "Emily, you know you can talk to me about anything, right? No matter what it is. I'm here to listen," Dr. Stevens said softly, his tone inviting and kind. Emily paused, her pencil hovering over the paper. She seemed to hesitate, as if she was considering whether or not to reveal what was on her mind. "I know, Dr. Stevens. I'm just tired," she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. But Dr. Stevens wasn't convinced by her answer. He could sense that there was something more, something Emily was struggling to keep hidden. After the session, he sat down with Elena to discuss his concerns. "Emily is still not ready to fully open up," he explained gently, but I can tell there's something deeper she's trying to process. It might take some time, but I'll keep working with her to help her feel safe enough to share." Elena nodded, her heart heavy with worry. She thanked Dr. Stevens, but the anxiety gnawed at her, a constant reminder that her granddaughter was carrying a burden she couldn't yet understand. Determined to be there for Emily, Elena resolved to stay as close as possible, observing every little change in her behavior, hoping that one day soon, Emily would find the courage to confide in her. In the meantime, Elena doubled her efforts to create a sense of security and normalcy in their lives, doing everything she could to reassure Emily that she was loved and supported. But the fear of the unknown of what Emily might be hiding never left her, casting a shadow over the precious moments they still shared. The second hearing arrived all too quickly, bringing with it a whirlwind of emotions that threatened to overwhelm Elena. She had prepared meticulously for this day, dressing in her best outfit and mentally rehearsing the key points she needed to emphasize. This hearing could be her final chance to prove that she was fully capable of caring for Emily, and she was determined not to let it slip away. As they stepped into the courthouse, Emily clung to Elena's hand, her small fingers trembling with nervousness. The fear in her granddaughter's eyes mirrored the anxiety swirling in Elena's heart. At the entrance, John was waiting for them, his demeanor calm and reassuring. He shook Elena's hand firmly, offering her a few last words of encouragement. "Elena, remember to stay calm and be honest. You've done an incredible job with Emily, and today we'll show the judge just how much you fought for her well-being." Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The social workers were called to the stand once more, this time armed with new observations. They reported Emily's recent anxious behavior, subtly suggesting that it might be indicative of instability in her home environment. As Elena listened, her heart pounded in her chest, each word feeling like a hammer blow. When it was John's turn, he stood tall, ready to defend Elena with everything he had. "Mrs. Miller," he began, his voice clear and steady, "can you share with the court what Emily's daily routine looks like and how you support her emotionally?" Elena took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Every day, I ensure that Emily has what she needs to feel secure and loved. I wake her up for school, make her breakfast, and every evening we share dinner and talk about our day. We've created little rituals like reading together before bed that help us feel connected. I know she's been struggling, but I'm here for her every step of the way, offering whatever comfort and stability I can." John then presented additional testimonies, including a crucial one from Dr. Stevens. "Emily is navigating a difficult adjustment period, which is entirely normal given the traumatic loss she's endured, Doctor." Stevens explained, "Mrs. Miller has been a pillar of support for Emily, providing her with the stability and love she needs to heal." The judge listened carefully, taking meticulous notes as each piece of testimony was presented. His face remained impassive, betraying nothing of his thoughts as he absorbed the evidence. After the hearing, he informed everyone present that he needed more time to review the new testimonies and evidence before making his final decision. A few days later, a letter from the court arrived at Elena's home. Her hands shook as she opened it, dread pooling in her stomach. The letter informed her of a temporary decision: Emily would be placed under the custody of social services until a more thorough evaluation could be completed. The words on the page blurred as tears filled Elena's eyes, her worst fears realized. "How can they do this?" she murmured, her voice breaking as she read the letter over and over, hoping somehow it would change. Just then, Emily entered the room, her innocent eyes widening in alarm as she saw the devastation on her grandmother's face. "What happened, Grandma?" she asked, her voice small and trembling. Elena struggled to maintain her composure, but her voice trembled as she spoke. "Emily, the court has decided that you need to stay with a temporary family for a little while, just until they make a final decision about what's best for you." The words had barely left her lips before Emily burst into tears, her small body trembling as she clung to Elena. "I don't want to go, Grandma. I want to stay with you." Elena wrapped her arms around Emily, holding her as tightly as she could, her tears mixing with her granddaughter's. "I want that too, my love," she whispered, her heart breaking. "We're going to fight this. I won't give up, I promise you that." At that moment, Elena felt as though the ground had been ripped out from under her, leaving her standing on the edge of a precipice. But as she held Emily close, she knew she had no choice but to gather every ounce of strength she had left and continue the battle for her granddaughter's future. The path ahead was uncertain and filled with obstacles, but Elena was determined to face it head-on, for Emily's sake and for the love that had always bound them together. Elena held Emily tightly, trying to convey a sense of security that she desperately needed but couldn't fully grasp. "I know, dear. I want you to stay with me too. We'll get through this together, I promise." The following days were some of the hardest Elena had ever faced. Emily was taken to a temporary home, and the emptiness left behind was unbearable. The house, once filled with the sound of Emily's laughter and their shared routines, now felt hollow and silent. Each day without Emily was a painful reminder of what she had lost, yet Elena knew she had to stay strong and keep fighting. She visited Emily as often as she could, clinging to those moments of connection to keep her spirit intact. Each visit was a whirlwind of emotions: joy at seeing Emily, sorrow at having to leave her again, and the constant undercurrent of worry about what might happen next. During one of these visits, something in Emily's demeanor was different. There was a seriousness in her eyes that Elena had never seen before, a weight that seemed far too heavy for a child to carry. "Grandma, I need to tell you something," Emily said quietly, her voice trembling as tears welled up in her eyes. "There's something I never told you about the night my parents died." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The gravity in Emily's tone and the look in her eyes made Elena's heart pound in her chest. She had always sensed there was something more to Emily's anxiety, something she hadn't been able to reach. Now it seemed she was about to find out what that was. "What is it, dear? You can tell me," Elena urged, doing her best to keep her voice calm despite the fear gripping her heart. She watched as Emily took a deep breath, her small hands trembling as she wiped away her tears. "That night I wasn't asleep when the phone rang," Emily began, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard everything. I heard you crying, and I heard something else. I heard a voice I never told you about." Elena's breath caught in her throat. She held Emily's hand tighter, trying to comfort her and to brace herself for what was coming. "It's okay, dear. What did you hear?" she asked gently, though her own heart was racing. Emily hesitated, her eyes wide and filled with fear. "I heard Mom and Dad arguing on the phone before the accident. Dad was yelling at someone. He said something about a threat and that they had to meet. I think someone did something to them." Emily's words struck Elena like a lightning bolt. She felt her world tilt as the implications of what Emily had said began to sink in. "You never told me this before, Emily." "Why not?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I was scared," Grandma, Emily replied, tears streaming down her face. "And then everything happened so fast. I didn't know what to do." Elena's heart broke as she listened to her granddaughter's confession, the pain and fear in Emily's voice tearing at her soul. She pulled Emily into a tight embrace, her tears falling freely now. "Thank you for telling me, dear. This is very important. I promise I'll do everything I can to find out what happened." In the days that followed, Elena couldn't stop thinking about Emily's revelation. It explained so much: Emily's anxiety, her withdrawn behavior, the nightmares that plagued her. But it also raised terrifying questions. What if Emily was right? What if someone had caused the accident that took her parents' lives? Elena knew she needed to act, but the thought of putting Emily in more danger was unbearable. She decided she couldn't do this alone and turned to John for help. "John, Emily told me something about the night of the accident that changed everything," Elena said urgently during a phone call. "I think we need to investigate this further." John listened intently as Elena recounted Emily's revelation. His tone became serious. "This is significant, Elena. If what Emily heard is true, it could change the entire case. We need to be careful, but we also need to gather more evidence to support what she heard." They agreed to start investigating discreetly. Elena and John began reaching out to old family friends, revisiting places that Emily's parents used to frequent, and looking for any clue, however small, that might shed light on the events of that night. They combed through records, made quiet inquiries, and followed up on any leads that came their way. The investigation was slow and painstaking, but Elena was driven by the need to uncover the truth, not just for Emily, but for herself. She knew that understanding what happened could be the key to bringing Emily back home and ensuring her safety once and for all. As they delved deeper, Elena felt a mix of hope and dread, knowing that whatever they uncovered could change everything yet again. But she was ready to face it because nothing was more important than protecting Emily and giving her the life she deserved. During this tumultuous period, Emily began to show signs of relief after finally unburdening herself of the secret she had held onto for so long. Her demeanor shifted. She became more open, more willing to talk, though the shadow of fear and anxiety about the court's decision still lingered. One evening, while Eleanor was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Emily walked in with a newfound confidence. "Grandma, I know it was hard, but I feel better for having told you. I trust you," Emily said, her voice steady and sincere. Eleanor felt a rush of emotion as she looked at her granddaughter, a sense of pride and relief washing over her. "I do too, dear. We'll find the truth together, and I promise I won't let anything bad happen to you." Eleanor and John's investigation began to bear fruit. They uncovered that, on the night of the accident, Emily's parents had received multiple calls from an unknown number. With the help of a private investigator, they traced the number back to a company that had connections with Emily's father. As they dug deeper, they managed to locate Mark, an old friend of Emily's father, who agreed to speak with them in a secret meeting at a distant cafe. "I knew something was wrong that night," Mark confessed, his voice hushed but intense. "Emily's father was involved in something big, something dangerous. He mentioned being threatened by some very powerful people." The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, revealing a dark and sinister narrative. Eleanor realized that the car accident that had taken Emily's parents was not just a tragic mishap, it was the result of a deliberate conspiracy. The realization filled her with both dread and determination. She knew she had to bring these findings to light in the next court hearing. When the day of the hearing arrived, John presented the newly uncovered evidence to the judge, including the call records and Mark's testimony. "Your Honor." John began, his voice firm and resonant. "We believe that Emily's parents were victims of a conspiracy. This case is not just about Emily's custody, it's about uncovering the truth and ensuring her safety." The judge, visibly taken aback by the new revelations, called for a recess to review the evidence. The courtroom buzzed with the gravity of the situation, and Eleanor and Emily waited anxiously outside, feeling that the truth was finally coming to light. During the recess, Eleanor and John discussed the significance of the new evidence. Their hopes mingled with the persistent anxiety of what was still to come. Despite her lingering confusion about the intricate details, Emily felt a renewed sense of safety by her grandmother's side. When the hearing resumed, the judge returned to his seat, his expression more serious than before. "After reviewing the new evidence presented, I believe there are sufficient grounds to investigate further the circumstances surrounding the death of Emily's parents. We will hear more testimonies and carefully examine all the evidence." John then called an unexpected witness to the stand, David, an old colleague of Emily's father. As David took his place, his nervousness was palpable, but there was also a resolve in his eyes that hinted at his determination to reveal the truth. "Mr. David, can you tell us what you know about the threats received by Emily's father?" John asked, guiding the testimony with care. David took a deep breath before he began. "Yes, I knew about the threats. Emily's father was investigating some serious irregularities at the company where we worked. He found out that some of the executives were involved in illegal activities, and when he tried to expose them, the threats started. He was scared for his life and his family's safety." The courtroom was silent, everyone hanging on David's every word. "On the night of the accident, he called me, saying he had evidence that could bring everything to light. But then, I couldn't reach him anymore. I knew something terrible had happened." As David spoke, Eleanor felt a surge of sadness and anger. Her son's life had been stolen by forces more insidious than she had ever imagined, and now she was in a battle to protect her granddaughter from the same dangers. The tension in the courtroom grew palpable as the gravity of the new revelations settled in. Everyone was on edge, awaiting the judge's next move. After the testimonies concluded, John made his final plea. "Your Honor, it is clear that Emily's family was targeted by a dangerous conspiracy. Emily's safety cannot be guaranteed outside the care of her grandmother, who has shown nothing but strength, love, and resilience in the face of unimaginable challenges. We respectfully ask that you consider all the evidence and return custody of Emily to Mrs. Miller." The judge, deep in thought, nodded slowly as he absorbed John's words. "Emily's safety is indeed our top priority," he said gravely. "I need more time to consider all the information presented. This hearing is adjourned until tomorrow, when I will announce my decision." As the court emptied, Eleanor and John exchanged quick words. "I think we have a real chance," John said, his tone cautiously optimistic. "The judge seems to be taking everything into account." Eleanor nodded, her face set with determination. "I hope so, John. Emily needs to be safe, and only with me can she truly have that." As they left the courthouse, the weight of the day's revelations hung heavy over them. The waiting continued, but for the first time, Eleanor felt a flicker of hope, a belief that the truth would finally prevail, and that Emily would be returned to her, safe from the darkness that had taken so much from them already. That night, back at the temporary home, Emily was unable to sleep, her mind restless with memories she had long tried to bury. When her grandmother visited, she felt a strong urge to confide more of what she remembered from that fateful night. Grandma Emily began hesitantly, her small voice trembling with the weight of her words. "I remember Dad saying he had to meet someone that night. He seemed so scared, and then I heard the sound of the accident." Eleanor's heart ached as she stroked Emily's hair, trying to offer the comfort and reassurance her granddaughter so desperately needed. "It's going to be all right, dear," she whispered, her voice firm despite her fear. "We'll find out the truth, and I promise we'll make sure you're safe." Later, as Eleanor drove home alone, the darkness of the night seemed to press in on her, mirroring the uncertainty that lay ahead. The evidence they had gathered was mounting, but she knew the road to justice was still fraught with challenges. The battle was far from over, and she steeled herself for whatever might come next. The following morning, Eleanor rose early, her heart heavy yet resolute. She dressed with care, choosing an outfit that projected the calm confidence she hoped to convey in court. Beside her, Emily, though nervous, seemed more resolved than before, drawing strength from her grandmother's unwavering presence. When they arrived at the courthouse, John was waiting for them, a determined look in his eyes as he shared that he had one final piece of evidence, something he hoped would be the decisive factor in their favor. As the hearing began, the judge entered the room, and the air was thick with anticipation. Everyone stood in silence, the tension almost palpable as they awaited the conclusion of this complex and emotionally charged case. "We are here today to reach a final decision regarding the custody of Emily Miller," the judge began, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom. "New evidence has been presented, indicating a possible conspiracy surrounding the tragic death of Emily's parents." John stood, his voice steady as he addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we would like to present one last piece of evidence. We have managed to recover a recording from the night of the accident. This recording captures a phone call between Emily's father and one of the executives at his company, where he explicitly mentions the threats he was receiving." The judge nodded, signaling for John to proceed. When the recording was played, the courtroom fell into a tense silence. The voice of Emily's father filled the room, thick with fear and urgency. "You can't do this. I have proof, and I won't stay silent. My family is in danger." His voice declared, the desperation clear. The recording ended with the haunting sound of interference, followed by the sickening crash of the accident. Eleanor gripped Emily's hand tightly, her own emotions barely in check as tears welled in her eyes. Beside her, Emily clung to her grandmother, seeking solace in the woman who had become her rock amidst the chaos. The judge, visibly moved by the new evidence, called for a recess to carefully consider all that had been presented. As the courtroom emptied, Eleanor and Emily sat in the hallway, their hearts pounding with a mix of hope and fear. John joined them, his expression cautiously optimistic. "This should be enough to convince the judge," Eleanor, John said, his tone reassuring. "He can't ignore the seriousness of what we just heard." "I hope so," John, Eleanor replied, her voice resolute. "Emily needs justice. She needs to be safe with me." When the hearing resumed, the atmosphere in the courtroom was even more tense. The judge's face was grave as he addressed the court. "This recording adds a significant dimension to the case. Emily's safety is clearly at risk, and we must ensure she is placed in a safe and stable environment." Before the judge could continue, a small hand was raised. Emily, gathering her courage, signaled that she wanted to speak. The judge, taken aback but respectful, nodded. "Emily, do you have something to say?" Emily looked to Eleanor for reassurance, and with a slight nod from her grandmother, she stood up, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Yes, Your Honor. I heard more that night. Dad talked about meeting someone he thought he could trust, but he was scared. After the accident, I heard someone say they needed to get rid of the evidence." The courtroom was stunned into silence by Emily's revelation. Even John seemed momentarily taken aback by the bravery of the young girl standing before them. The judge, clearly affected by the new information, asked for more details, and John elaborated on how the recording and Emily's testimony pointed to a real and ongoing threat to the family's safety. "Emily," the judge finally said, his voice filled with genuine admiration, "thank you for sharing this with us. You were very brave." Eleanor, her heart swelling with pride and love, pulled Emily into a tight embrace. "You were amazing, dear. So very brave," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. As the hearing concluded, the judge announced that he needed time to consider all the new evidence before making his final decision. The adjournment was bittersweet. There was still uncertainty, but for the first time, there was also a clear path toward justice and safety for Emily. As they left the courthouse, Eleanor and John exchanged hopeful glances. "We have a real chance," Eleanor, John said, his tone filled with cautious optimism. "The judge is taking everything into account, and I believe he'll make the right decision." Eleanor nodded, her determination unwavering. "Emily needs to be safe, and only with me can she truly have that. I won't rest until she's back where she belongs." As they walked away from the courthouse, hand in hand, Eleanor felt a deep sense of resolve. The battle was far from over, but she knew that together, she and Emily could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it, the hope was that they could reclaim the peace and security they had lost so long ago. The tension in the courtroom was thick as everyone anxiously awaited the judge's final decision. He had requested a brief recess to consider the newly presented evidence before making his ruling. During this pause, Eleanor turned to John, her voice tinged with a mix of hope and fear. "She was so brave, John. I hope this is enough." John, ever the reassuring presence, gave her a confident nod. "It will be Eleanor. Emily's testimony and the recording are compelling evidence. I believe the judge sees that." When the hearing resumed, the judge re-entered the room with a grave and determined expression, his movements deliberate as he took his seat. Eleanor and Emily sat hand in hand, the tension in the room almost unbearable as they waited for his final words. The judge adjusted his glasses, his eyes scanning the courtroom before he began to speak. After carefully considering all the evidence presented, including the recording and the courageous testimony given by young Emily, it is clear that this situation is far more complex than it initially appeared. The judge began, his voice steady and authoritative. "The safety and well-being of Emily is our paramount concern, and she must be placed in a secure and stable environment." He paused for a moment, his gaze falling directly on Eleanor and Emily. "Eleanor Miller," he continued, "you have demonstrated unwavering love and commitment to your granddaughter. The evidence supports that you are providing a safe, nurturing home for Emily. Therefore, I am ordering that custody of Emily be returned to you immediately." A wave of relief and joy surged through the courtroom. The tension that had been so suffocating just moments before dissipated, replaced by the soft murmurs of approval and the sound of subdued applause. Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes as she pulled Emily into a tight embrace, her heart overwhelmed with gratitude and happiness. "Thank you, Your Honor," Eleanor managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise to continue caring for Emily with all the love and protection she deserves." Emily looked up at the judge, a shy but heartfelt smile on her face. "Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to stay with my grandma." As the decision was finalized, Eleanor and Emily were surrounded by friends and supporters who had come to stand by them in court. John, looking relieved and deeply satisfied, approached Eleanor with a warm smile and wrapped her in a congratulatory hug. "We did it, Eleanor." "The truth finally came to light," John said, his voice filled with pride. Eleanor, still holding tightly to Emily's hand, looked at him with deep gratitude. "Yes, John, we did. I couldn't have done this without your help. Thank you for everything." In the days that followed, life slowly began to return to normal. The heavy burden of uncertainty that had weighed them down for so long was finally lifted, and Eleanor and Emily could once again find peace in their everyday lives. To celebrate, they hosted a small gathering at home, inviting close neighbors and friends who had supported them through the ordeal. Emily, seated beside her grandmother, looked more joyful and at ease than she had in a long time. The warmth of their home, filled with laughter and the comforting presence of loved ones, was a stark contrast to the fear and uncertainty they had endured. "Grandma, I'm so happy to be back home," Emily said, her voice soft but full of contentment. "I knew you wouldn't give up on me." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with love as she wrapped her arms around her granddaughter. "Never, Emily. I would never give up on you," she whispered, holding her close. The storm had passed, and as they sat together surrounded by those who cared for them, Eleanor knew that no matter what challenges might lie ahead, they would face them together, just as they always had. The court's decision brought a much-needed sense of peace and stability to Eleanor and Emily's lives, yet it also ignited a burning determination within Eleanor. She knew that while Emily was safe, justice for her son and daughter-in-law was still out of reach. The truth behind the tragedy needed to be fully uncovered, and those responsible had to be held accountable. With John and the private investigator by her side, Eleanor was ready to continue the fight. They knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but they were prepared to face it together. With Emily's custody firmly back in Eleanor's hands, life began to regain a semblance of normalcy. However, their quest for justice was far from over. Eleanor and John, now bolstered by the unwavering support of their community and driven by Emily's determination, worked tirelessly to push the authorities to reopen the case of the accident. With new evidence and crucial testimonies in hand, the investigation began to unravel a web of corruption within the company where Emily's father had worked. It exposed the executives who had been involved in the illegal activities that ultimately led to the tragic loss of Emily's parents. As the investigation gained momentum, Eleanor and Emily continued to rebuild their lives. Emily returned to school, slowly rediscovering the joys of childhood. She joined extracurricular activities, made new friends, and began to smile again, her laughter once more filling the home she shared with her grandmother. Eleanor, too, found renewed strength within her community, which rallied around her with unwavering support. Their story, which had initially been a private struggle, began to garner attention in the local media. As their fight for justice became known, Eleanor and Emily's resilience and courage inspired many. Their story was a testament to the power of love and determination in the face of unimaginable adversity. Months later, the persistence and tenacity of their efforts paid off. The authorities made arrests, taking into custody those responsible for the conspiracy that had claimed the lives of Emily's parents. Justice was finally served, bringing a profound sense of closure and relief to Eleanor and Emily. One peaceful evening, as they sat together in their garden, gazing up at the starry sky, the weight of the past months seemed to lift. The night was calm, filled with a quiet contentment that had been absent for so long. "Grandma, you always told me that the stars are our loved ones watching over us," Emily said softly, her eyes reflecting the twinkling lights above. "Do you think Mom and Dad are proud of us?" Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with a mixture of joy and sorrow as she looked at her granddaughter. Her eyes, shining with tears of happiness, were full of love. "I'm sure they are, dear. They're always with us, guiding and protecting us. And now, thanks to your incredible courage, we can continue living in peace and happiness." Emily wrapped her arms around her grandmother, holding her close. "I love you, Grandma. Thank you for never giving up on me." Eleanor stroked Emily's hair gently, her heart full to the brim with love and fulfillment. "I love you too, my dear, and I will always be here for you, no matter what happens." As they sat there in each other's embrace, the stars seemed to shine even brighter, a symbol of the new beginning that lay ahead for Eleanor and Emily, a future filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. As we come to the end of this emotional journey, we hope that Eleanor and Emily's story has touched your heart and made you reflect on the power of love, courage, and determination. Now, we'd love to hear from you. What have you learned from their story? Is there one lesson or value that you will take with you and apply in your own life? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. We're eager to see how this story has inspired you. If you liked this video, please leave your comment below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue to bring you more inspiring stories. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video.